Welcome to a healer's guide to Nokhud Offensive, where we cover dungeon mechanics from the healer's point of view. We'll cover the bosses from left to right, but you can access any of the first three bosses in any order. Each of these bosses have 3 or 4 identical mini-boss mobs that must be defeated in order for the boss to become active. So let's kick things off with the trash surrounding Granith. The mini bosses in this area are the 3 Lance Masters. These packs are very threatening and you need to be ready with healing at all times. For starters, there are 2 casts that need kicks and attention. Disruptive Shout should be kicked, or it will interrupt your party and do big AoE damage. Rally the Clan needs to be stopped since it can't be kicked, but if this cast finishes, it will enhance the damage that all mobs do by 50% for 12 seconds. Stop this at all costs or be ready for the aftermath. You should also protect yourself by watching your positioning. Don't stand on the tank or you will be hit by cleaving strikes. Also move out of War Stomp or it will one-shot you. Watch your feet as well, as Rain of Arrows will create small swirlies on your feet that need to be dodged. Even if your party handles these mechanics perfectly, there is a lot of damage being done by the Longbow's Shoot and the War Spear's Swift Stab. Shoot happens constantly and often, and you need to follow its target with spot healing. Popping cooldowns will be almost mandatory to keep up with this damage. Swift Stab targets the furthest player from the War Spear and does heavy single target damage. Have externals or significant shock healing ready for this so your allied isn't vulnerable to dying to shoot. Once these packs and its mini bosses are handled, you're ready for the boss Granith. This fight is set up like so, with the boss in the center of the fight and 3 crossbows surrounding the boss. Throughout the fight, the boss will spawn an ad called a Saboteur directly across from one of these crossbows. The Saboteur will attempt to run across the battlefield to that crossbow in order to disable it. Help the DPS kill this enemy by blasting it with damage, but also stunning it near the boss so that they can continue to cleave damage. After this enemy dies, it's your job as the healer to book it to the crossbow that he was heading to, because it will then be armed and ready to fire at the boss. It's important for the healer to do this as soon as possible to stun the boss, or the group will take extra damage. But with us taking on this responsibility, it allows the DPS to kill the boss faster. Aside from firing crossbows, healers are responsible for healing 2 spells of major AoE damage. The first cast is Shards of Stone. This happens periodically throughout the fight and does massive party-wide damage. Make sure everyone is topped up during downtime so that this damage doesn't kill your party, and use defensives as well as throughput cooldowns to heal this damage back ASAP. Eruption is the other cast that the boss can do, where he pulses out, amping up pulses of damage until the cast is stopped. The only way to stop this cast is to hit the boss with a crossbow, so as long as that mechanic is handled properly, you won't really have to deal with this cast. However, beware, because if you don't handle the boss mechanic properly, this will do so much damage. And finally, don't stand under the boss during Tectonic Stomp, and rinse and repeat the ad mechanic and healing Shards of Stone, and this boss dies in no time. Next up is the trash surrounding the Raging Tempest. You'll need to at least defeat 4 Stormcallers to activate this boss. This trash can crank out a lot of damage, but the majority of it comes from casts. Don't let Tempest channel, since it pulses out damage and a dot. Also, prioritize stopping consecutive storm bolts, as these casts pick a target and absolutely nuke them. If Tempest does go off for at least a tick, dispel the debuff and commit a cooldown. Trust me, it does massive damage. When Stormbolt casts go off, prioritize spot healing their target. This does heavy single target damage and may even one-shot in higher keys. You'll want to use your cooldowns to combat Tempest casts and Totemic Overload. And don't hesitate to use cooldowns if multiple Stormbolts are going off, as these are the only true instances of major damage coming to your party. Moving on to the Raging Tempest, this boss can be very tricky for healers, but once you understand the mechanics, it can make all the difference. This boss will continuously spit out these lightning orbs all over the battlefield. If you are hit by one of these orbs, it'll do a small amount of damage, but very importantly, it'll buff your damage and healing by 5% for 20 seconds. This buff can stack up to 10 times or up to 50% bonus healing and damage. Therefore, maintaining close to 10 stacks at all times will make healing this fight way more manageable. One of the main mechanics this boss has is where he marks each player with a giant ring called Lightning Strike. Stand in a way that you only take damage from your ring, and also try not to hit any orbs with your ring as it will destroy them, causing more damage. This does significant damage, so just make sure that your party is topped up before these go off and heal them up after the damage happens as well. You can use minor cooldowns to help with this throughput, but save your largest healing cooldown because eventually the boss will enter an electrical storm, pulsing out massive damage for 15 straight seconds. Make it your priority to rush to 10 stacks of the buff and maintain those 10 stacks for the full duration of this phase, and combat this damage with your major cooldown and defensive so that you're able to heal through it. Other than these mechanics, look out for Energy Surge as it is very heavy damage on the tank, so send any spare globals their way. Maintaining 10 stacks and saving your cooldown for the intermission is the key to this boss, but once you nail it, it becomes very easy. Next, we head towards the council boss, Tira and Maruk. But in order to activate this boss, you first must kill the 4 soul harvesters. This area has an insane amount of effects that need to be dodged or moved out of, so be very careful of your positioning and always watch your feet. You must kick the cast of the Ohunas called Rotting Wind. This does massive damage and reduces all healing received by 20%, which obviously sucks. Death Bolt Volley should also be kicked or at least move away from the mini boss before the cast goes off. Do your best to dodge Chant of the Dead, but also try to boop enemies out of this as well as it buffs their damage. Finally, be on the lookout for ghost versions of yourself, as Shatter Soul does a big slam of damage but also decreases your damage done until you walk over that ghost version of yourself to collect it. Do not treat these pools lightly, as damage is very shocking, and you should always make sure that your party is sitting as close to 100% health as possible, so popping cooldowns on pool is definitely not a bad idea. But make sure and pop your minor cooldowns as soon as any damage happens, since damage on these pools is usually followed by more damage. Follow up Shatter Soul with some minor AoE cooldowns, spot heal anyone that gets hit by any of these effects, and be aggressive with your cooldowns and CC, and this pack shouldn't cause too many issues. But failure to do any of these things might cause a wipe. Once these packs are handled, you move toward Tira and Maruk, and you'll quickly notice that this is actually 2 bosses. One important thing to note is for every second that these 2 bosses aren't close together, their damage is going to amp up for the rest of the fight. So as the healer, understanding that this fight will do more damage the longer it goes on should help you decide how you want to layer your throughput and cooldowns. Now there are a few mechanics on this fight that all require healing. The rest of the mechanics are basically just dodge or die. What will occupy most of your time and spot healing is Tira's Quick Shot, which chooses a player to do big damage to. As always, follow these casts with plenty of spot healing, as 2 in a row on the same player could spell death. Maruk will also periodically cast Brutalize, which will make your tank sweat, so throw any spare global cooldowns into topping them up, as this risks killing them if you don't. At max energy, Tira will mark every player and then throw Gale Arrows at them. This does significant damage, but also spawns 4 tornadoes to travel out from each player, which then come back in once they go all the way out. You can stack on top of other players to limit the randomness, but be very careful, as loose stacking might cause you to die by the tornadoes. This mechanic is absolutely one worth using a cooldown to heal everyone for, as you'll want everyone to be full health before the damage hits, and as soon as possible afterwards, as Tira's then going to target someone with Quick Shot, and you do not want to risk losing anyone to that Quick Shot. Aside from this, do your best to dodge every particle effect that you see on the ground, especially these lines that Maruk shoots out. You have 2 seconds to move out of it, or else it will kill you. But once this boss is taken down, you can fly to the final boss. But be very careful of where you fly, or you will get shot down. I always fly over this bridge toward this flag, and it hasn't failed me yet. Once you get there, there are these 2 henchmen that crowd the boss room. They are incredibly easy since all you have to do is dodge the spear that Balara throws, and then both of them have a form of a frontal. Stand near these enemies so it's easier to dodge the vehement charge and the conal frontal called Broad Stomp. But finally, we approach Balakar Khan. This boss has a base set of mechanics in phase 1, then he enters an intermission that does heavy damage, and after the intermission, all of his mechanics are evolved with new mechanics stacked on top. Starting off with his P1 base spells, he throws Iron Spear at a player doing massive damage. Then he'll charge toward that player to collect his spear. Protect and quickly top up this player and dodge the charge as soon as possible if you're the one targeted. As always, since this does such huge single target damage, make sure that this player is topped up, protected with shields or externals, and heal them up as soon as you can after this damage. He also has a cast called Upheaval, which is a basic frontal cone. However, it comes with these circles on each player that will do damage at the same time the cone goes off. Heal everyone up quickly after this, as it's designed to make players vulnerable to the spear mechanic. At 60% health, the boss becomes immune to damage and he spawns 4 caster adds and continuously rains down AoE damage. Kick these casters and do as much damage to the adds as you can afford, since killing them is the only way to end this phase. Also dodge the lightning strike swirlies during this phase and for the rest of the fight. Absolutely use your largest healing cooldown here, as this is the biggest heal check in the entire fight. Once the adds are dead, the boss comes back with evolved versions of his abilities. Iron Spear now sucks in every player on impact. Commit a minor cooldown to ensuring everyone is healthy enough to survive this, and be ready to move with movement abilities, as this does heavy damage and risks wiping if you don't get out fast enough. Upheaval will now leave a permanent damage puddle under each player after it casts. And finally, in this phase, the tank will also have a dispellable debuff put on them that is priority number 1 to dispel. Failure to do this will almost assuredly cause them to die and then causing a wipe. And once you defeat this boss, you have taken down the Nokhud offensive. You should now have every tool to tackle this dungeon and keep your party alive. As always, my name is LBNinja7 and I am trying out a new format of video, so make sure and tell me how I did or how you like it or want to see it change in the future down in the comments below. While you're down there, make sure and hit the like button if this video helped you, and subscribe if you want to catch other guides like this one. And before I leave you here today, I want to give a special shout out to the patrons of this channel, as they are the reason why this channel can still exist, why I can continue to make videos like this one. So if your name is on the screen, thank you so much for carrying this channel, and if you want to see your name alongside these guys, check out that Patreon link down in the description below. Well guys, that's going to do it for this guide. As I said, you have every tool that you need to tackle this dungeon. Stay tuned for guides on the rest of the Season 4 dungeons, as well as all the healers. Thank you so much for watching this video and for all the support on this channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.